Chapter 17. Erin, Hyatt. May 5th, 2086. The Galactic City, Angel Moon. My fellow sentients, our strength as a community has been tested for the past 2 years. Tested sorely. But the departure of my predecessor, Degra Keswick, whom we thank for his service, has given us the opportunity to reclaim our future from the one who sought to steal it away. Many fought for us to get here. We have lost brothers and sisters, husbands, wives, children. We wept for neighbors and friends who will grace ourselves with their presence no more. We, as a civilized society of spacefaring peoples, would be justified in seeking vengeance. It may even bring some sense of satisfaction. But instead, we will exercise restraint. This is not the hyperspace war of 50 years ago. We are not fighting a senseless extragalactic monster this time. The enemy forces arrayed against us are of the same species that once delivered our galaxy from an existential threat like no other. The humans are friends and comrades and brothers and allies. We cannot forget that we have been forced into this war in which we have fought and killed our own allies and friends. A single woman forced this war against a cooperative and brotherly species upon us. She is Akira Robinson, the Paradox. She will be found and then held responsible. Until such a time, we cannot blindly pursue the destruction of the human species, not even to satisfy the righteous anger born from crimes committed against ourselves. The atrocities Earth committed against the galaxy were done under threat and duress, and a dangerous woman holds an entire species hostage and forces the galaxy to bend to her will. As the galactic custodian, I will not sacrifice the people of Earth just to bring about the destruction of one individual. As your custodian, I will seek out elements of humanity that are known to be friendly to us. We shall enlist the aid of those humans who are still true friends of the galaxy and break the Paradox's hold over her own species. And when she is alone and friendless, abandoned by her followers, then the Paradox will understand, in the moments before her death, that her time has come and gone. Directly in front of the Galactic Custodian's desk, a camera operator, a young Skildari, gave a positive hand signal and said, "Excellent, Madam Custodian. Are you ready for a second take?" The new Galactic Custodian stood up from her desk and looked at the clock on the wall. "Second take? What are you on about? Get out and tell the press corps to do their fucking job. I've got work to do." The cameraman packed up his equipment and withdrew. As he exited, a very large reptilian entered the office. This alien was much, much bigger than the Galactic Custodian. He had a long, scaly snout and a set of leathery wings that made a rustling sound as he walked. "Madam Custodian," the reptilian said, "do you have a moment?" "What?" the new custodian roared, her voice full of anger. The advisor quailed, but delivered his report. "The Higaran Empire has followed through with their threat, ma'am. The government in Assam Kith Sid has downgraded Higara's membership in the Galactic Council and withdrawn all Higaran military units from the Galactic Defense Force." "Oh, this is a nightmare," the Galactic Custodian said, shaking her head. "We've lost 15 motherships, nearly 200 supercapital ships, as well as some 4,000 smaller vessels. The number of officers, crew, and soldiers we've lost is still being counted. Going forward, Higara is no longer participating in the war. They've dedicated themselves to fortifying their inner rim borders," the advisor concluded. "Preparing for war against Al-Raki, I'm sure," the new custodian grumbled. "Any other bad news?" "No, ma'am," the advisor said. "But you should know, the Emerald Institute has allowed us to make contact with the paramilitary group you requested." "Which one?" asked the custodian as she brushed her long gray hair out of her eyes. "The individuals who showed up in the Senate chamber," replied the reptilian. The ones who have enough money to hire the services of the Emerald Institute claim to be Stormbreakers, and told me they have friends in the Galactic Defense Force. The Galactic Custodian's head snapped upward, and her eyes widened. "Excellent," she said. "Send them straight to the SCC. I'll meet them there." Deep inside the bowels of the Tydani Imperial Palace, and very far underground, was the wreckage of a starship. The vessel itself was nearly 10,000 years old, but nobody could remember exactly when the ship's interior was restored. It was possible to move directly from the palace above to the ship below, where a modern military command center was hidden in what had once been the starship's bridge. The vessel itself was called Sajuk's Wrath. 10,000 years ago, it was the flagship of the Higaran Empire. When the Tydani conquered Higara, they built their imperial palace over the site of their own victory. At some point, the Tydani Emperor converted Sajuk's Wrath into the headquarters of the Tydan military. And now, this place had become the Strategic Coordination Center, the very core of the Galactic Defense Force. Military officers worked intensely to make sense of battle data coming in from across the galaxy. Each time a human warship was sighted or engaged, the data was processed here, allowing the GDF to formulate a plan of action and then execute it. All 6 Stormbreakers were escorted into the Strategic Coordination Center. They closely followed behind their guides. The first was Erebik, the avian who had spoken to them on the day Keswick was unseated. The other guide was a gruff-looking member of the Tydani species, bald humanoids with thick gray skin. This was the director of the Emerald Institute, a powerful organization that was friendly to both the Stormbreakers and the Galactic Defense Force. "Now, this is the control center of the war room," Erebik was saying. "This is where the custodian manages the Galactic Order of Battle." Varian was talking to the Tydani man. "We appreciate everything the Emerald Institute has done for us," Varian said. "I honestly don't know how we would keep the Niagara flying without your technicians." "And I think none of us are willing to answer that," replied the Institute director. The Institute director showed the Stormbreakers to a large holographic projector in the center of the war room. "Please bring up the report from Shipyard Nabal," the director said. Shimmering in bluish-white light, a 3-dimensional hologram of the spaceplane Niagara appeared above the Stormbreakers and their allies. "Emerald Institute technicians have started installing the upgrades you requested for your ship," the director said. "Mr. Ririnui, we analyzed the weapon schematics you took from the UN Black Site, and there is a danger." "It's a railgun, of course there's going to be risk," Maui said. "What's got you so worried?" "Well," the director said, "the Niagara is a small vessel, too small to be called a genuine frigate, but too large to be classed as a corvette. Spinal-mounted railguns are generally meant for, well, frigates that are actually frigate-sized. Our technicians do have the ability to install a railgun on your ship, but there won't be enough space to store ammunition, not without radically rebuilding the hull. At best, you'll only be able to carry 10 slugs. That's not a lot of firepower." Kingi gave Maui a reassuring look and then spoke to the director. "True, but we're not planning to go toe-to-toe with a battleship. We just need an anti-capital ship weapon to facilitate our own escape, if we ever run afoul of one. Score a few devastating blows, and then flee before the enemy gets their wind back." The Emerald Institute director nodded. "Very well. We will carry on with the weapon installation." While all of this was going on, Nainu grabbed Erebik and pulled her aside for a private conversation. "How is it possible for either one of us to be gifted?" he demanded. "I thought Jericho destroyed the gift 50 years ago." "You and I are not gifted," Erebik clarified. "We cannot manipulate minds or make soul fire, but you and I are genetically predisposed to sense the presence of psionics. And the way you looked at me in the Senate chamber, I do think that if the gift still existed, you would have burned me with soul fire in that moment. No doubts at all. I saw something in you, little Celt. Nainu folded his arms in thought. He was frustrated. No, you must be mistaken, he said. I'm just a translator. I can't fight. I can't even fly the Niagara. I'm small and quiet. Nothing special. Nainu trailed off, his doubts getting the best of him. Erabik turned to look at the other 5 Stormbreakers, who were deep in conversation with leading members of the Galactic Defense Force. Nothing special? Erabik repeated. You stand on the shoulders of giants, Nainu Dukonle. I sense great potential in you. She rustled her feathers and gave Nainu a gentle pat on the head. More potential than those 5, she concluded, because you have taken a step into a much larger world, and when the time comes, I think you'll bring about something for all of us to sing about. 10 minutes after the Stormbreakers arrived in the Strategic Coordination Center, a very overworked-looking reptilian barged into the room and demanded everyone's attention. Varian's jaw dropped at the sight. Is that a dragon? Varian gasped, pointing at the newcomer. Someone, please tell me that's a talking dragon. The dragon-like alien cleared his throat. Human Stormbreaker, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm told you are Varian Robinson, the leader of the group, yes? Yeah, that's me, Varian replied. Who are you? I apologize, replied the dragonish creature. My name is long and nearly unpronounceable in your mammalian language. Suffice to say that I am the advisor to the Galactic Custodian, and I am here to announce her arrival. Then the advisor puffed out his chest and raised his voice for everyone in the room to hear. Presenting, by the grace of the Sacred Mountain, the legitimate elected successor to Vetu Kealoa, most watchful guardian of the unnamed mountain, governor of the Commonwealth Academy of Science, overlord of Hakihea, heir to the legacy of Toa Vahine Mami Tamihana, patron of the Reformed Church of the Mountain, president for life of the Triple Alliance, and galactic custodian, Marka Ranginui, queen over the Commonwealth of Partogans and Levakians. To a round of applause, the new galactic custodian entered the war room. This was Marka Ranginui. Like Maui, she was a member of the Partogan race, a diaspora of humans who were descended from the Maori people of New Zealand. However, Marka was not any ordinary Partogan. She was their queen. Her official badge of office was a beautiful green gemstone, the Vetu Karerarera, the centerpiece of a brooch that held together a cloak made from beautiful bird feathers. Marka herself was a young woman in her early 30s. Like the vast majority of Partogans, she had dark skin, purple eyes, and gray hair. Early in her reign, Marka had decided to emulate the famed warrior queen Mami Tamihana, and was modeling her own appearance after that of Toa Mami. She was very muscular and had the build of a rough-and-tumble fighter. And she also had a traditional te moko tattoo on the lower half of her face, staining her lips a deep black. As Marka entered, Maui lowered his head in a respectful bow. The Partogan queen recognized one of her own subjects and stopped to greet Maui before introducing herself to the rest of the Stormbreakers. I'm so glad to finally meet you, Marka said. My military advisors told me the Stormbreakers were back in action. It bodes well for the future. And Robinson, you are from the same family as Blake himself, correct? Do you have any contact with him? I'm afraid not, Varian replied. I'm trying to keep my family away so the UN doesn't target them. We've all had to keep our families at a distance. As Nainu rejoined the group, Varian said, Congratulations on becoming Galactic Custodian, Your Majesty, but I still don't know why you called us here. Marka clapped her hands and summoned the advisor to her. Tell the General we're ready to see him now. The advisor stepped out of the war room and came back a few seconds later, followed by a military officer. This individual was a member of the lion-like Levakian species. Quarter flattened her ears and swished her tail. She was half human, meaning her own Levakian traits paled in comparison to the massive lion before her. The Levakian officer was very tall and thin, with a head highly domed and vicious-looking eyes that were sunken in. He seemed to move in a snake-like fashion, swaying his head from side to side as he surveyed the war room. The Levakian officer was the most brightly colored person in the room, as his fur came in vivid patterns of orange, white, and black. The officer rendered a salute and introduced himself. General McCavity, Galactic Defense Force. We've met before, Maui said, back when this whole mess was first starting out. Yes, I remember that too, Irabik cut in. The general would not stop praising the unique design of your starship. Interestingly enough, that's the reason I've called you here today, Queen Marka said. General McCavity told me about your ship's ability to disguise itself. Holograms, Maui explained. The Niagara has a set of external holographic emitters that can fool light-based sensors. We can slip past some of the UN Navy, provided their sensors are old or their crews are a little lax. Do you need us to infiltrate something? Quarter asked. We do, Marka replied. She gestured to McCavity, who spoke. We've been reviewing the intel you gathered while you were on Earth, and found something alarming that requires immediate investigation, McCavity said. Specifically, it was your claim that ISO Director Scarlett Freeman was reported dead. We heard it from her daughter, Varian said, and Nezzy heard it from Freeman's husband. I think that's pretty definitive, sir. McCavity, the advisor, and Irabik all looked at one another. Finally, Irabik broke the bad news. Well, you see, we have our own intelligence that says Scarlett Freeman is alive. And she's on the move, McCavity added. All 6 of the Stormbreakers dropped their jaws. Nainu swore. You've got to be kidding, Kingi growled. Freeman is still alive? How do you know? General McCavity flattened his ears and used the hologram generator in the middle of the room to illustrate his story. Mycor spy drones on Altair intercepted a hyperwave call. Scarlett Freeman contacted the leadership of the Cult of Jericho, demanding a face-to-face meeting with the sorceress Erin Hyatt. It was a matter of some great urgency. But this is the most important detail. Director Freeman was so anxious to arrange this meeting, she implied that the friendship between the Cult of Jericho and the United Nations was in jeopardy. The meeting between Freeman and Hyatt has now been scheduled for the end of this month. Do you know where this meeting will happen? Maui asked. His eyes were darting back and forth as he attempted to log all of this data into his smart glasses. That's the part that alarmed us and caused us to reach out to you, Queen Marka explained. You see, this meeting between Hyatt and Freeman is supposed to happen in a place called Arcadia Bay. The location raised several alarm bells for us. Quarter, Nainu, Maui, Setla, and Kingi all looked at Varian, who was the only member of the team to know the name Arcadia Bay. Varian had gasped at its mention. I've heard of that town, Varian said. Birthplace of Maxine Caulfield, one of the very first gifted humans. The whole city was destroyed in some freak supernatural event almost 100 years ago. The advisor pulled up a holographic map of Arcadia Bay. The wrecked town lay on the picturesque Oregon coastline. So you won't be surprised to hear that the UN has a massive military presence in the city right now, the advisor asked. As the Stormbreakers watched, the advisor pointed out several locations around the region on the hologram, showing that the human military had built several outposts around Arcadia Bay. I understand you suspect Hyatt of being the Paradox, McCavity said. No, we ruled her out, Quarter clarified. But the Colton progeny are still doing a lot to help the UN against us. Why don't we just bomb the whole site from orbit? kill Hyatt and make sure Freeman stays dead this time. I wanted to, grumbled McCavity. The advisor gave him a very stern look. General, with all due respect, we can't get much intel from a pile of charred corpses, the advisor protested, flapping his wings in frustration. We must observe that meeting, not stop it. Anything those two humans say could be used against the UN military. The advisor is right, Queen Marca said, but there is one other reason we wanted to send the Stormbreakers on this particular mission. Queen Marca pointed at Nainu. Eribik told me about you, Interpreter, Marca said. She is confident that you are like her, sensitive to psionic energy. The other 5 Stormbreakers all looked around at Nainu. Wait, really? Quarter said. Nainu, that's amazing! Nainu turned pale and looked at the floor. Nothing special, really, he muttered. On the contrary, Eribik said. You should let the custodian finish. Marca nodded and then pointed to the holographic representation of Arcadia Bay again. The location is significant for another reason, she continued. Yes, Freeman and Hyatt are going to meet here, but more important are these scans, taken by a cloaked Higaran vessel during a recon mission. The hologram lit up in shades of purple and blue, illuminating the town in strange relief. Maui saw this and gasped. No way, he said. What? The other Stormbreakers asked. What do you see? Maui pulled off his smart glasses and took a closer look at the hologram. That's... His voice was full of disbelief. Psionic energy! The town's full of it! Queen Marca nodded. Arcadia Bay is flooding with psionic energy, and the source is nearby. Controlling the hologram with a computer, General McCavity zoomed the image out to reveal a map of the Oregon region. The Stormbreakers were greeted with a very strange sensor reading. Psionic energy seemed to be spilling out of a very specific point in the Klamath mountain range, and spreading out across the rest of Oregon like a cloud. Holy Mother of Jericho! Varian breathed. What the hell is happening in Oregon? We would like to know, Queen Marca replied. And we also want to know if this can be used to help the war effort in any way, McCavity added. And that's where Nainu comes in, Eribik said. As Eribik continued, everybody looked at Nainu, who was now quaking in terror. When you look at any map of the Oregon region, you'll see it is very mountainous and covered in forest. There will be very few places to land a starship. Nainu Dokunle, you must use your sensitivity to follow the psionic energy to its source, and then report the identity of the source to us. Nainu gulped. Well, He sounded very unsure of himself. I mean, I guess I can do that. It'll be like taking a long hike through nature, right? That's one way to put it, the advisor said with a chuckle. The progeny and UN will be too busy to fight you anyway, as there are local rebel forces to the north and south of this area to keep them occupied. Varian gave Nainu a pat on the head. Here you go, buddy. Easy mission. Walk around in the mountains for a few days and hunt for, I don't know, psionic ghosts or something. Corder addressed the Galactic Custodian and her cabinet. As soon as we get our ship back from the Emerald Institute, we'll be on our way back to Earth. Count on it. May 29th, 2086. Newport, Oregon. Erin Hyatt, self-proclaimed sorceress and leader of the Cult of Jericho, picked her way across the remains of a battlefield. She was on the beach of the Oregon coastline, about 2 days' journey from Arcadia Bay. Earlier today, this beach had been the scene of a furious skirmish between the progeny and the Americans. After almost 4 hours of fighting, the cultist forces had won, driving the Americans away or crushing them here in the bloody sand. Erin was an older woman, but she had aged gracefully. She was a veteran of the Second Hyperspace War, having seen combat at the Battle of Neptune. During the legendary conflict, a nuclear explosion left Erin blind. Sometime later, Erin was visited in her hospital bed by Jericho, the girl who became a god. Jericho restored Erin's vision, and the rest was history. Erin built the cult of Jericho and its progeny, and now she was leading Jericho's faithful in a war that would decide the future of humankind once and for all. As she stepped over a fallen progeny fighter, Erin thought over the past 2 years of the conflict. The war was not going well. Despite being the largest religious movement in the United Nations, the progeny was much smaller than the cult itself, and each battle, like this one, depleted strength that was not easily restored. Before the outbreak of violence, the progeny would expand its membership by kidnapping alien children and indoctrinating them. Thralls made up the bulk of progeny forces, and now they were making up the majority of dead fighters on this beach. A group of acolytes and sorceresses came to join Erin on the beach. These human members of the progeny served the same function as officers in a professional military. Erin listened as they delivered a report on how the day's battle had gone. Her eyes fell when the acolytes explained that the Americans had started to withdraw as soon as they started to take casualties. The sorceresses gave Erin a list of fatalities, showing that over half of the progeny thralls on the field had been killed today. Erin compared this list against other lists from other battlefields. She felt a rising sense of anger. Before the war, the progeny could have replaced these dead thralls by abducting children from nearby alien worlds like Hakiheya, Amadio, or Sabak. But now Scarlett Freeman was demanding that all of these children be turned over to the ISO, leaving none for the progeny to use. If the war kept going like this, it would be impossible for the progeny to sustain itself. Erin crumpled up the casualty list in her hand and said, "If we have a few more victories like this, we'll be undone." One of the sorceresses tried to reassure Erin. "There won't be too many battles in the future, Your Holiness," she said. "We are on the cusp of a greater spiritual victory." "Quite right," Erin said. "We must persevere. We must press on. Jericho wills it." Bloodied and shaken by the day's action, the surviving progeny militants gathered around their leader and continued to march south. Nothing would stop them from reaching Arcadia Bay.